Alright, in this video we are going to discuss about the fight or flight response, and this video is created for the second round of Elsevier. This picture shows a classical situation when a horrible stimuli is behind you and you got to decide that whether you want to fight with that horrible stimuli or you want to flee away. To know the basics of the responses, you got to have a very found knowledge about the receptors, the adrenergic receptors especially. So if you look at the receptors, generally the adrenergic receptors, they are under stimulation by two type of hormone. They are epinephrine or norepinephrine, and these epinephrine and norepinephrine hormones modify the responses which are physiological and which are needed to fight or flight. So there are two type of receptors, one that are stimulated and one that are inhibited. So stimulated receptors are the alpha one. Generally all the organ which need to be stimulated are under the alpha 1 adrenergic receptor except three, which are the heart, the kidney and the lipocytes, which comes under the beta 1, especially the lipocytes which are modified beta 1, they are called the beta 3 receptors. And the inhibitory receptors are generally the beta 2 receptor, which relaxes the targeted organ, and the alpha 2 receptors are found at the three places. These are the presynaptic nodules, as well as GIT, as well as in the platelets. So this is the basic concept about the receptors. So if there is a release of epinephrine, so the organ having alpha 1 receptor, they would be stimulated, and the same epinephrine would inhibit the organ having beta 2 receptor. Now in order to know about very specific thing, suppose if a lion is behind you and the autonomic nervous system has started working, and hypothalamus, the posterior nucleus especially of the hypothalamus, have initiated the fight or flight response by releasing epinephrine and norepinephrine indirectly or directly, so that the fight or flight response commences. Initially, what do you know, that there are several markedly events which are going on in the fight or flight response. Suppose if you take the example of pupil, right? Suppose this is the pupil, and there is a special muscle called dilator pupillae. So in the fight or flight situation, when your sympathetic nervous system is at peak, you would notice that your pupil dilates. This is due to that the dilator pupillae have alpha 1 adrenergic receptors. So alpha 1 adrenergic receptors, as I've said, they are stimulatory, so they would contract the dilator pupillae and the pupil would dilate. So this is one of the response of the sympathetic nervous system in the fight or flight situation. Another response you would notice in the eyeball. Suppose this is the eyeball and you have an lens here, right? And here is the ciliaris muscle. You got to think that whenever you are in a horrible situation, you got to have a tunnel vision, you need to have a far vision. So these muscle should be relaxed, the ciliaris muscle should be relaxed, so there should be beta 2 adrenergic receptor in this muscle. We want to relax this muscle because we want to have a far vision, obviously in the horrible situation. This is one of the second response. And another response you would notice about the piloerection. And suppose this is your skin and you have an hair over here, and this is the erector pili muscle, and obviously they would contract. That is why the hair stands up, especially that is called in technicality the piloerections. So you want to stimulate this erector pili muscle, so you got to have also alpha 1 adrenergic receptors. If you talk about the heart, you want that the blood should reach to your body which needs the blood more. That is why your heart should pump faster. And in heart, I have said, there are, for stimulation of the heart, there are modified as there are another type of receptor which are called the beta 1 adrenergic receptors, and they would promote the positive chronotropic effect as well as the positive dromotropic effect, a positive bathymotropic effect, and inotropic effect. Everything would be done and heart would pump faster at its rate, so that the more of the blood is reaching to the organ where it is needed. Of course, more blood is needed to the skeletal system where there are muscles, so the blood supply to this would be increased. And if you want to increase the blood supply, the lumen of the artery should be widened, so you should have beta 2 adrenergic receptor of the smooth muscle in the artery that should be relaxed, so that the more blood is reaching to the muscle. And at the same time, you would easily notice that when a lion is behind you, you don't need to digest the food which is inside your stomach, so the blood supply to the stomach should be reduced, and the blood which is needed by the body should be redirected to that. So the blood vessel which are in the gastrointestinal system should be contracted, so they should have alpha 1 adrenergic receptors. These are all responses to the sympathetic nervous system stimuli, and these responsible are actually the part of fight or flight responses. Also, you may find in the kidney, you'll notice that whenever you are frightened or when lion is behind you, you don't need to urinate, right? You would only urinate when there is peaceful situation in the parasympathetic nervous system, so they would also constrict. So here also in the kidneys you have the alpha 1 adrenergic receptors. So this is very brief overview about the responses which are created during fight or flight responses, and these are very important because if you want to dilate the pupil, and if you want to you want to have a far vision, you would have a piloerection, and that is necessary because sympathetic nervous system also triggers piloerection is necessary because sympathetic nervous system triggers the heat gain center. So heat gain center would be stimulated, and you want the heat to be lost from the body. That is why you have pyroerection. And also along with that, you may have sometimes tremor because of the over domination of beta 2 adrenergic receptors. So whenever you are frightened, you may sometimes feel the tremors. Also, there is one more important situation in the flight and fright response, that is about the uterus. So if you have a uterus which is not pregnant, generally in the sympathetic nervous system, non-pregnant uterus have the alpha 1 adrenergic receptor. I am talking about the non-pregnant uterus. So during the sympathetic nervous system, the alpha 1 adrenergic receptor would contract the uterus. But supposedly the mother is pregnant, and that pregnant mother undergoes the sympathetic stimulation, and if that uterus have alpha 1 adrenergic receptor and that mother is after the lion, so you don't want the uterus to be contracted because if the uterus contracts, the product of conception would come out. So the uterus modifies itself and have the beta 2 receptors later on, so that further complications are not eradicated and further complications are not created as well. So this was very brief about the fight and flight responses, and these are certain signs you would the cardinal signs, you can say, the pupillary dilation, the piloerections, and the cardiac palpitations, and these are certain very much important signs in the fight and flight response which would create yourself and which would prepare yourself either to fight with the situation or the flight with the situation. Of course, the skeletal muscle would contract so that you can run, or if your central nervous system is ready and signal comes, and if you want to fight, so you can fight even. The decision is up to you, and this was very brief about the fight and flight responses. And thanks for watching.